Hi, this is Alex from PHP Academy, and in this series we're going to be creating an Ajax chat application. So we're going to be using a combination of styles to style what you can currently see on the screen. Then we're going to use JavaScript and the JavaScript library jQuery to set the interval for when the chat's refreshed. And then obviously we're going to be calling PHP, and we're going to be using a MySQL database to store and then obviously retrieve the data from there. This is going to be based off current users that are logged in. So you can see I've got two examples here. You can see in the URL up here I've got user equals 2. Now this is just for testing because I'm not going to build a login system to demonstrate this, but I'm specifying this, which is setting a session. So you can see that over here it's user equals 1. So in this case, if I was to type hello, you can see that this appears in both windows. So these are chats, obviously could be different users across the other side of the world. And in here I can then say hello there, and this would be from a different user. So these get parameters at the end here, these get variables that we're specifying in the URL, define what user is logged in. But obviously in your case, your system would already define that somewhere. So this is essentially what we are going to be creating. It's very basic in concept. We've got a few files to run through, but really it doesn't get that complicated. It's a very, very simple process. So in the first part, we'll look at setting everything up, and then we'll get going with creating this. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do in our Ajax chat application is set up our database. Now, as I said in the introduction video, we're already assuming, or I'm already assuming, that you have a login system in place that allows users to log in with a particular user ID. And this is important because then it allows your users to log in and start chatting as their user accounts, and it will display their username. So you'll obviously need to modify some things within this to suit your application, but in terms of this example, I'm just using this example table. And we can see if we go over to the structure, we've got a user ID, which is an auto increment integer, primary key as you'd expect, and the username here is just a variable character type and 25. So nothing really special here, and I've inserted two usernames, Alex and Billy, and we're going to test these side by side later on. So we need to create another table, and this is going to house all of the chat messages that we type into the box or into the chat application. So I'm going to add two more columns because we're going to have 4 columns in total. I'm going to call the table chat. The first field is going to be the message ID, just an index on the table, so this isn't important in our actual application. We're also going to have the user ID of the person that posted it. So this is going to relate, this is going to be a number, it's not going to be the username. This is going to be a number pointing to that particular user. We're then going to have a message field and a timestamp field because we're going to be ordering by time, and we're going to do that descending, so the very latest messages are at the top. So with the message ID, we need to set this as an auto increment. We need to set it as a primary key, and we can leave that as integer. User ID can be left as integer because again it's sort of a joined column for the users table, which is also an integer. The message is going to be text, and timestamp is also going to be int. So let's go ahead and save this out. So we now have our table. Brilliant. So what we can do is, to test this, we can start to insert some messages and see what our view is going to look like on the front end, so how these messages are going to be pulled through. Then we'll start to build the functionality to actually allow the users to type in a message, hit enter, and send the message along. So in the next part, we're going to look at actually designing the form on our front end and then pulling some of this data through. Okay, so we're back over to our browser, but we've done absolutely nothing yet on the code side of this. I've blanked all of the files that I've used in the example, and I'm going to take you now through the directory structure of this application. Now, the first thing to note is that there's a lot of files contained within this, but these should all really be part of your main site. So for example, we've got JavaScript files, CSS files, so you'll have styles relating to your site, and perhaps JavaScript files as well. So although this looks overwhelming, really the only files that we're adding here is the chat file here, the two classes, the core, which You may have something different set up on your site already. This is mainly to deal with database connection, the chat class, and then the init.php, which will bring all this together. And there's a few other things that we're doing as well in here that are just a bit fiddly because of the way that the user system's not set up, but we'll see this a bit later on. So let's take a look at the files that we're using. Well, we're obviously using a landing page. This is going to be where we actually see this chat application working. We then have our JavaScript and CSS files. So the JavaScript file, I've given its own name, so chat.js. That's basically just going to be the JavaScript. We're going to include jQuery on the index page. We'll include this JavaScript file. We'll write the JavaScript there that relates directly to our application. We also have our styles.css file, which we're going to use to style some of the elements on the page, font sizes, the size of the text area, things like that. Now, slightly more difficult, we've got core and then init.php. Now, this is going to include the classes that we can instantiate and then instantiate as objects and start to use the methods within these. And then we have the two classes, which are chat and core. So let's go ahead and open these. Both empty at the moment, but this is going to be a class called core and a class called chat. And they're just going to do things like fetch the chat, connect to the database and stuff like that. So we're using object-oriented programming here. So in Ajax, we've got this chat.php file. Now what this is going to do is the JavaScript is going to send the messages or the request to this JavaScript file, this PHP file, and that's going to either pull back database data or insert data. So this is sort of like the bridge between JavaScript and PHP in the back end. And this will obviously instantiate our chat class, connect to our database, and do various bits and bobs. So to start with, we're going to look at the index.php file. We're going to look at forging the session, and we're also going to look at the markup and the styles for this. So if you've got your own styles and markup, feel free to skip the next video. But in the case that you want to look at the styles, look at the markup, and see how everything might be tied together, it's a good idea too. So that will be in the next video.